Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BuzzStream Podcast. My name is Vince Nero. I'm your host, and today I'm joined by Ellie Sumner, the digital PR manager at Prosperity Media. How you doing, Ellie? Thanks for joining.
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Doing well. It's late here, early for you. I'm in the States. You're in Australia.
Yep, Sydney.
Yeah, awesome. So I think you're the first Australian on this pod, or at least the first person calling in from Australia. So it's exciting.
Yeah, I don't think there's many digital PRs in Australia. I'm one of the few.
Yeah, which is awesome. And kind of one of the reasons I think we're chatting today is you reached out to me, introduced yourself, and we got to talking a bit and realized like there's a lot to talk about when it comes to, not only just digital PR in different areas of the world, but specifically Australia. I know personally when I was with Siege Media back in the day, we were thinking of expanding into Australia because it's becoming a tech hub, agency hub. And it seems like, you kind of had a similar idea and took you from the UK where you did work as a PR to Australia. So yeah, I think a lot of people can learn from you today and I'm excited to get talking.
Yeah, me too.
Before we get into it, everyone, I just want to remind you all to like and subscribe. The more we can expand on this podcast and get people talking about it and commenting and share it with your colleagues, the more we can get on great guests like Ellie and help you all further your digital PR careers and get those links that we so desperately need. So, Ellie, with that out of the way, I guess the icebreaker I usually like to do would be interesting to see if there's like something specific in Australia, but I like to ask people what favorite piece of content or a recent piece of content that you were just particularly stood out to you or you liked.
I don't want to disappoint. It's not Australian, but there's not that many pieces of digital PR in Australia yet. But there was one that I saw on LinkedIn the other day from Bottled Imagination, and they'd done a campaign called Misdiagnosed, and it was about the number of female-specific illnesses that have been misdiagnosed and the most commonly misdiagnosed conditions, which is really interesting. And I love a campaign but it's kind of meaningful and has that like awareness piece to it as well. Obviously, a fun one's great, but it's nice to like work on something and like see a campaign that has that awareness piece. And it was really, they had a really cool visualization of like a wrist with like the hospital bands on the wrist of like oxygen. So it was really cool way they did it.
Yeah, I've got to check it out. I don't know as much of their stuff, but yeah, that sounds great. And I'll be sure to link to it in the show notes. So I mentioned this before. You were working at Digital Loft in the UK. Then you moved to a traditional PR agency in Australia. And then from that traditional PR agency, then you moved to work with Prosperity, also in Australia. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, that transition, why the move to Australia?
The move was just like personal choice. Like Australia's much better weather than the UK. Like today it's 30 degrees outside. At home, I think it's been raining and flooding and all sorts. Close to the beach, like all the usual reasons Brits move to Australia. Um, so yeah, left Digital Loft, which well, I stayed freelance for Digital Loft for a while. Digital Loft are a great agency. If I was in the UK, I imagine I'd still be there. So big shout out to them. But then I needed to be sponsored to stay here. So I had to go into traditional PR. And because digital PR wasn't a thing about a year ago, really, like nowhere was doing it. It's only in the last like 6 months that I think that I've noticed anyway, more agencies doing digital PR. So Jonas, our digital PR director here, he introduced the digital PR kind of offering in our agency like a year ago. So we've been doing digital PR Prosperity for a year, and I joined about 4 months ago.
Yeah, awesome. I kind of had a similar journey I moved from the East Coast of the United States to the West Coast for similar reasons. I lived in San Diego for a long time, and that's where I got my start in kind of. I worked at Siege Media for a long time. Now I've since moved back to the East Coast, but yeah, the weather is a great reason to move. But you unloaded a bunch there, talking about some key points in what I think is a little surprising, at least to me, with digital PR and specifically in Australia. So one of the things you said was up until like a year ago there weren't really many people doing digital PR. Do you think, had they been doing some version of it, but maybe just haven't called it digital PR? I know that's kind of the similar situation that we're here in the States. Like people don't necessarily refer to it as digital PR. They call it link building or content marketing or content promotion, but it's not necessarily referred to as digital PR here.
No, I think it is literally just like traditional link building mainly. They have, I think, it's kind of the other way where people have said they're doing digital PR, but really it's been a bit dodgy and been like more traditional link building than digital PR. So yeah, but people, if you work in like a PR agency, if you got getting coverage on like an online publication, you still try and get a link in there. Obviously, it's good for brand awareness and like click throughs. But yeah, nothing specific digital PR, even if it's not called that, I don't think.
Right. So I make this mistake a lot on this podcast where I don't necessarily define digital PR. People define it in different ways. And based off of your last answer, it kind of sounds like you might define digital PR as getting links from online publications, pitching content to get links from online publications. Is that kind of where your head is at with the term?
Yeah, I'd say like the first part of it is always kind of like building links. That's why clients are coming to us to build those highly relevant, high authority links. But then there's also the secondary element of building brand awareness and building expertise and authority, that kind of it as well. So I think there's kind of a bit of both in there.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say too, like I feel, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. There's kind of starting to become a shift where, when you say digital PR, the first thing people think about is links. That's the first thing people report on, but there's also, like you said, the brand awareness, the expertise. I feel like that part, the second part of that, is starting to kind of become a lot more important to people, although it's not as straightforward to report on as, we got you a coverage in whatever high DA publication. But that seems to be where the shift is going. I'm curious if you've seen that as well.
Yeah, and I think so in Australia as well, like to get the coverage here, you kind of need that extra bit. Like you need to have the spokespeople to give a quote, and you need to perhaps have like a case study to speak on the story, like as part of kind of getting the coverage here and like really relevant stories to the brand, that kind of thing, which I suppose is kind of towards that kind of more brand building. And I know a lot of our clients really like to even not just get links, but they love it when they're in the radio, like on the radio. They love it when they're in print as well. So it's kind of like they're quite happy to just get coverage overall and have that traditional PR as like an extra benefit to paying for PR.
Also, yeah, let's take a step back. So you worked in traditional PR in Australia, then you moved to digital. What would you say are some of the things that you carried over into digital? I'm really just curious about the differences between the two.
I've honestly carried over like most things. I think the main difference is that like we do the data driven campaigns in digital PR, which we did a few surveys, well, quite a few surveys in traditional PR. But it was a lot of like kind of brand led stories and what we could kind of hook the brand to. We'd never do like an index or kind of data analysis aside from the surveys. So I think that's the main difference. But in terms of like everything that's carried over from traditional PR, I try and do digital PR in a very similar way. So making sure that like pitching exclusively to like tier ones, having the case studies, having quotes from the spokespeople, opportunities to interview the spokespeople, opportunities to interview the case studies, all that kind of thing. I do carry over into digital PR here.
Can you explain the case studies thing to me just so I know what you're talking about? Because I'm a little fuzzy on that connection.
Yeah, so for example, we did a campaign for one of our clients is like a driving school. So we did a campaign about the cost of getting your license in each state. So for that, one of the journalists really wanted a case study of like a learner driver who like to discuss their thoughts on the price of learning to drive and just to speak to the kind of topic of the research. So it's kind of like sometimes I'll ask for it, or sometimes I'll try and go to the journalist with a case study already, because that can really sell in a story. Like I've had times before where, for example, as a research about part-time workers in Australia, and having like the case study as a part-time worker in Australia who's a man and is taking that part-time work to look after his children. That's kind of like a big selling point of the story to the journalist, not just the research. It's kind of like having that case study gets it over the line. The research is just kind of helping make the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you hear that feedback from a lot of people. And I mean, I remember doing it myself. It's like when you're pitching a journalist, try to do all the work for them, right? You just like want it to be as turnkey as possible. It sounds like that's exactly what you're doing. Yeah, I get that. I'm trying to think, have I ever done something that intense, like that intensive? Because are you still also including like expert quotes from, so it's like the expert quote as well as this case study. That's interesting.
Yeah, sometimes it all just kind of it depends on the story, but sometimes you'll kind of offer a case study. Sometimes you won't be able to find them. Like I've had times, quite a few times, where the journalist wants a case study. Honestly can't find one, and the story's just not been able to go through because they need a case study like that much, which is always disappointing. But you can't help it if you can't find someone.
It's funny. I mean, it's like, it sounds like I mean, I just said this, like you're doing the journalist's job, but like you really are doing the job of a journalist to find these people. Wow. So, I mean, that's not something that you did in the UK, right? This is kind of the first time I've heard of this, like, in a case study approach.
No, never. I think we've seen it where like kind of stories maybe based like maybe a lot more of a reactive piece around a case study, but no, every time there's research, half the time in like, well, not even half, like the majority of the time a journalist wouldn't even reply to the email, they just publish the results. Like, yeah, like you can go live, oh, that's nice they've covered, but here, like, you'll get like 99% of cases a journalist will reply to you, they'll want some more info, they'll want to like check the data, they'll want maybe an extra quote. So I feel like there's a lot more like relationship building and working together in Australia than there was in the UK.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, obviously it's much bigger, but like you don't see that type of relationship here in the States, right? Like,
Yeah.
wow. Okay, so that's kind of like some of the nuance of the pitch process. Let's talk a little bit about content ideation and the type of content that you're pitching. And I want to really dig into that. That's where my favorite part of this is content ideation.
Yeah, I think it is very similar. It's kind of nice here because, as I said, like digital PR isn't a big thing. Like data-led campaigns aren't really that big. So I've honestly gone back in ideation to like campaigns I did like a few years ago in the UK and been like, oh, we can do this here. Before I joined, they did a best cities to start a business in Australia, which I think's been done quite a lot of times overseas, but never in Australia. And it did so well. I think it got over like 100 links in TV and radio as well. So like I think it's easier in that sense, because you can kind of use a lot of inspiration from overseas, and I think it does work. I also do think journalists here are more receptive to a survey. I know it is used in the UK as well, but maybe those like higher brow journalists here are kind of more accepting to a survey as well. So we do a lot more surveys here than I ever did at Digital Law.
Is there a specific platform you use for those surveys in Australia?
We use Pure Profile, which is all
Pure
over.
Profile?
Yeah, I think they're all over the world.
But yeah, I gotta check them out.
Yeah, and then just kind of because the media landscape is so limited in Australia, you only have maximum like 10 tier one maybe. And then you'd be like a few lifestyle, a few of like each niches. You kind of have to make sure you're thinking like multiple angles because they often want like an exclusive angle if like the Daily Telegraph has covered it, Sydney Morning Herald don't want to. So you kind of have to consider the angles as well as like try and think of those regional angles because obviously Australia is huge, but there's only like 4 or 5 major cities. So thinking of those regional angles.
That's a really good point. I didn't even think of that. Like, so, I mean, do you feel handcuffed by ideation in some regards? Because I can feel like when you're pitching ideas, like maybe you do I don't know how you do it. I mean, it's probably a good follow-up question, but like say you do like 4 posts a year or something, it's like you got to really make sure that they're not overlapping. And yeah, that just seems pretty tough to me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is. I guess it's like beneficial, but also a bit of like hold you back from certain ideas as well. But yeah, just try and work around it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you find yourself selling to clients? Is that a different process? Say you hit on that a little bit earlier about, kind of the brand and the kind of like the whole marketing tie-in, expertise tie-in being important. But yeah, let's get into like kind of selling to clients.
Yeah, so I don't do like new business, but Jonas, our digital PR director, does. And I know that here a lot of brands that come to us don't really know what digital PR is. So having a slide on what is digital PR is kind of part of our standard pitch deck, which back in the UK, you'd have people coming to you because they wanted digital PR. Here it's more our clients come to us wanting traditional link building. And then it's like, oh, well, actually, we do digital PR and this is what it is. And this is how it's kind of superior to traditional link building or how it can complement link building and like showcase how it works and all the benefits and what is a digital PR campaign. So I think it's definitely more education when selling to clients compared to what I would be in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's similar in the United States still is.
Yeah.
I mean, I find myself in that role right now at BuzzStream when I'm writing content is like trying to push the value of digital PR over some of these older school methods. I mean, what do you have any thoughts on that? Like the value of digital PR, like how that gets framed to clients over some of the traditional methods?
I think it's like how you can get such high DR publications compared to maybe like the traditional link building and how they're more like trusted and relevant than those sites. And I think when clients hear that you can kind of get them on like linked on news.com.au, which is like DR98, it's obviously like a big, oh wow, that would be great compared to those traditional link building.
So they're not as concerned about link volume, it sounds like.
No, we don't really focus on link volume. Also, like if you get like a syndication, you can get like 100 links and like it covers a lot of the country, but it's kind of syndicated. So like once you've got that, no one else is going to cover either. So it's kind of like because of the smaller media landscape, it's a bit harder as well to get that volume of links without like the syndication. So
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so you mentioned a couple. I want to get back to the content thing. You mentioned a couple content types. You said like data, studies, surveys. Are there any others that you've tried or you've seen successful in Australia?
um, I think like reactive. So back in the UK, you'd always see like the reactive, like expert tips or like those kind of campaigns. They just don't work that well here. I think just maybe because there's such a smaller amount of journalists, and like still a lot of like PRs pitching that potentially they have the content. I feel like they also like will do it themselves. Like if they want to run that story, they'll find an expert themselves. I think there are a lot journalists here are a lot more like dig into who the people are or what the data is, that kind of thing. They're more like stringent on checking it. But yeah, like when I first moved here, I was like, oh, let's do this. And like no one would cover anything like along the like experts or stuff like that. So I think that's something to know.
So they'll go the extra mile to get their own expert quotes, but they won't get the case studies.
I think that's just if they want to run the story. Like if they're in their heads like, oh yeah, like we'll do this story. But if I'm pitching a story, they're like, yeah, we'll do it, but you have to find it.
Yeah. Yeah, wow, that's funny. Okay, so yeah, that the reactive, I feel like it's such a big thing. It was something I never really did much of, but yeah, I guess it sounds like it doesn't work as well. And I do remember, so I talked to Hannah Montgomery from Shout Bravo agency in the UK, and we just published a podcast about international pitching. We didn't really get much into Australia. and some of the, she's kind of saying a lot of the same things, like data goes a long way, it seems like internationally. But I think some of the other things that were important were like cultural awareness. And, one of the things I'm thinking here is like, if listeners here are listening to this podcast and thinking like, okay, maybe they're in the UK or they're in the States and they're like, oh, I should start trying to get Australian clients, right? Like smaller market, but, not a lot of people doing it. I would imagine there's a lot of education needed around kind of the culture and how to pitch and how to talk to journalists. Do you find that to be the case?
Yeah, I think it's like my pitches are quite similar. It honestly depends on the story and pitching, but I feel like if you lead with that relevant hook and like most important information, and stuff like, yeah, very, very similar to pitches I write. I think it's kind of like no more like the media, like knowing the journalists and like offering someone exclusives. Like, so you need to know who will only cover if it's an exclusive and like making sure you kind of have that tiered approach to outreach. So if you know you wanna get the Sydney Morning Herald for this, like just pitching to them first and offering it as an exclusive, like stuff like that. I think it's like the nuances that are probably harder to learn and going to the traditional PR agency first really helped me learn that because they've been working in Australian media for years and years and years.
Yeah, let's get back to the exclusive thing because that's interesting to me, and I want to get your take on how you think through who to offer the exclusive to, because I know that can be a toss up sometimes.
Yeah, I think, well, as you obviously work in a place, you get to know the journalists. So I think, I usually think, because a lot of our clients need to digital PR, try and think where haven't linked to them yet. So for example, News Corp publications, so they're like the Daily Telegraph, the Herald Sun, they are typically a bit easier to get a link from than perhaps like the Sydney Morning Herald, the Guardian. So I'd probably go to, maybe if the story suits them, go to Sydney Morning Herald if they've not got a link from them and offer them exclusive first. And then if they say no, or if they don't get back, then kind of go into the Daily Telegraph as an alternative. So I kind of think about that as well as where I think the story will like land the best, or if where the brand wants to target. So if they only want to target like, if news.com.au is a dream publication and the story seems like going to them with the exclusive. So just kind of like where they've been covered before and where we can get some new links, or where suits the story the best, or where the brand wants to be mentioned. And seeing probably like the three things I think about with exclusives. And then also the journalist. So if you've got a relationship with a journalist, it's quite good to go to them first with the exclusives, which builds on that relationship if you can offer them an exclusive. Some will only take exclusives. For example, if it's the Weekend Telegraph, they only want exclusive stories. So you just need to make sure that if you want to pitch them, it's an exclusive. So I feel like it's kind of learning all about the media and then kind of tailoring it to them.
Yeah, who you want to pitch to? Yeah. Does some people do? I feel like people do this differently. When you get an exclusive with one place, do you then not pitch it at all anywhere else? Or do you just wait until that place that has the exclusive goes live and then you can pitch to other places?
Yeah, I'd wait until that one goes live. I think I'd probably change the angle. It depends if you offer a first run or an exclusive. If it's a first run, let's say I offered a first run to the Daily Telegraph, and then once that was published, I could probably go elsewhere with the same story. But if it's an exclusive, you could still do that, but you might just damage the relationship if it's picked up elsewhere. But it's usually fine. It's usually if it's just another tier one, like then you can go out to like the smaller regional publications, like the lifestyle publications, like far and wide, and it's usually fine. It's usually the tier ones that kind of compete against themselves.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay, so getting back to the content ideation thing, another thing popped in my head about, kind of learning and knowing the area, knowing Australia culture. One of the things that I think it was Will Hobson said, we had a conversation about the differences between the US and UK. They had just opened an office in the US. And he was saying, I get so many more content ideas when I'm here in the US, like walking around, looking at billboards, watching, commercials and just being around. Do you find that that's the case, or that would be the case for people trying to make it in Australia if they're not necessarily there?
Oh, I think I find it kind of similar. I think I find it harder because I'm not like because there's not a big digital PR kind of scene over here. I'm getting less inspiration from other campaigns. I feel like in the UK, I always knew every agency was doing, and it was kind of like, oh, that's a good idea, or I like that, and you could kind of like see different stories. I find even though there's still all the resources out there and like keep up to date, I just feel a bit out of it, which I find harder to think of ideas. But then at the same time, because there's less ideas here, it is a bit easier.
Yeah, that's interesting. I remember also when I was with Siege doing a lot of kind of repurposing of content. And I always kind of like that approach, like internationally. You kind of hinted at this earlier about like, finding something in the UK and trying to redo it in the US. It was like, I forget who did this campaign, but it was like how much air is in a bag of crisps was something that was done in the UK. And we just took it and did it for a US client. We called it chips because that's what we call it here. I'd imagine you can kind of do a similar mix and match it with Australia from the US and UK content.
Yeah, for sure. It's quite nice, especially because you can kind of sell it into the client like, oh, it's proven concept, like it's worked overseas, like it'll probably work here.
Well, okay, so I want to get into one more kind of angle of this, and it's the kind of media list and list building and relationships with journalists. We touched on it a bit, and I actually talked to you a little bit before because I just did a little bit of research, and we put out this extensive list on media databases, and I had never heard of Telum Media, which seems like maybe the de facto for Australia, although there might be a few more. But I was curious to, I forget what your answer was actually. Do you use Media List Now, Media Database?
So we didn't at Prosperity for and just until last week actually, because they're a new team. We've just literally been doing it ourselves, which is kind of it's quite can be time consuming, but you do get most of the emails on the websites, and it is a really good way of making sure you're getting relevant contacts, up to date contacts. So I do quite like that method, and I still do that. But we've just started using a new platform called Stream, which covers media monitoring, lists, and outreach all in one tool. So it's literally been a couple of days, but we're using that now, and that's helping just find a few extra contacts from like smaller publications, which I think is definitely needed. And just finding those emails when some come up invalid or you can't find an email that's really helpful.
Yeah, what
Yeah.
what does your kind of validation process look like for those lists that, well, I guess, I mean, you don't have lists or you just started having lists. What does your validation process look like for making sure that a journalist is, still there, still working, still, relevant fit and everything?
There's the tool does have like a bit where you can see the recent articles for most of them. So that's quite good to like see if they're covering the right topic. Because sometimes it will say they cover like business and then you'll look and it's not business or they're not right kind of business that you're targeting. So that's useful. But I do like to make sure I go on like websites and I try and do it like I pick the publications I want to go on the website, see what the people talk, who's talking about what, then looking for the email on the tool rather than the other way around. That's just personally how I prefer to do it. But then I know some you can't find the journalist name, so I think that's when the tool comes in as like a secondary like backup option.
Yeah, I found it's like the smaller kind of local sites sometimes are just not good with that at all. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So when we talk about media lists, media databases, building kind of relevant journalists, you also had said, I think when we talked, that like, you're building a lot more relationships with journalists. It sounds like it's more of the like, you could probably call a journalist, right? Or like go meet them and get coffee. I mean, is that the case?
Yeah, I've met a couple of journalists before, and I think in the UK, I mean, I wasn't based in London, so I don't. I'm sure if you probably lived down there, it might be different. But yeah, never even tried to do that in the UK. But here, well, in my traditional PR agency, it was encouraged to kind of get those media contacts, and meet them in real life because you do learn a lot by talking to them. I met a lovely journalist from the Daily Telegraph for coffee. We were there for about 2 hours. She was great. But you kind of can ask those questions like, what time's your like newsroom and what working hours do you work? What time's the best time to contact you? What stories do you like? Kind of what are your thoughts on these stories we've got coming up? And then when you have that relationship, if there's a story I think suitable for her, I'll send it straight to her and she'll either cover it or she'll give feedback or she'll say, not right for me, but I'll forward it to XYZ who I think this is better for. And I know she's happy to join on the phone as well. I don't love a phone call to be honest. Well, it is a good way to kind of like discuss things. It's a lot quicker than email, and you can kind of do it on the spot and workshop stories. I just did that with a crime journalist from the Sydney Morning Herald. So we've got a lawyer as a client. So we just had a big conversation about what he could offer them and what they need for stories and stuff like that, which was really interesting.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. So just so I can kind of wrap my head around it, like you say you have let's say a story like the best cities for startups, one that you talked about doing. How many pitches are you sending out for a story like that, a data led piece?
Um, Probably when we do it in stages. So I'd start off with like national and like tier one state publications. As I said, there's not that many, but then you've got like a tier one state for each state. So that's about 8 publications. And then like the national ones. And then try and do like maximum like 3 journalists from each one of those to begin with. And then we kind of then go, if no one gets back, we go to like a further group of people at those. Um, and then it'll go into like the more angles for like the niche ones or the regional ones. So I think it depends every time on the story, but we'll typically do like stages of outreach. I think maybe on average, maybe like 100 journalists in total from like media lists have done in the past, thinking back. But yeah, I think it definitely depends on the story you're pitching because some might only be relevant to like a small handful of journalists, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And then overall, like what does reporting look like for your clients outside of coverage, obviously?
We put on like DR, obviously, and then we always list like anchor tag. Do you list anchor tags? Like, no, I don't actually know. I should know that. But like the link it's going through to potentially anchor text. And then reach, which is a bit wishy-washy because nothing gives a true reach really. And then with the new tool we've got, it offers a lot more like detail into like the coverage. So we've been looking at like advertising value, but it's not something we report on directly. It's just like a nice to have, like, oh, by the way, like here's the advertising value. But yeah, typically just number of links and DR.
Do yeah, I mean, I guess the reason I asked that was because talked about a little bit in the beginning, like the brand tie-in and like, I was curious if clients ask for that kind of stuff, like brand, how's this impacting my brand awareness? And like, do you do unlinked mentions, linked mentions? Like, do they care about follow links versus no follow? Are the clients sophisticated enough, I guess, to care about any of the like kind of SEO implications?
Yeah, we don't report on follow or no follow just because like we can't control it. So we kind of explain that to them in like the onboarding or like if they ask the question whether we can or not. I mean, we could if they asked, I'm sure we would, but no one's kind of been like, oh no, can we report on that? And then yeah, we do report on like the unlinked coverage as well. We have like a separate sheet with all that in. And then like that's just mainly like reach that we cover.
Do you ever follow up on those unlinked mentions? I'm curious how receptive journalists are for that kind of thing.
Yeah, it depends. I think we have an 80% link ratio. So to be fair, I'd say half the time they don't link and we have to chase up, but usually they're pretty good in adding the link in, which is, I think, partly because like as digital PR is not as big here that maybe people don't ask for the link that often, so they don't think to put it in there. But they're quite open to putting it in. But some places just say it's against our policy. But the majority of places do, and half the time when they say they're against link policy, they've either linked in the past or then go on to link in the future. So I think sometimes the journalists just make it up.
Yeah, I just don't feel like doing it. Yeah. We've all been there. Well, that's awesome. Ellie, really want to thank you for your time. I guess, to wrap this up, do you have kind of like it sounds like doing digital PR in Australia is awesome, right? Like you have a lot of ideas that you can tap into. It sounds like the journalists are really nice and receptive. What are some of the challenges?
I think just probably just like similar in that not every campaign works. We've been quite lucky that most of them do, but just the usual having to repitch it, find new contacts. Maybe there's always brands that maybe a bit trickier to think of ideas for because they've got legal implications. But I think most of the issues are similar to what you get around the world.
Yeah, it's just universal digital PR woes. Yeah. Well, great. I want to encourage people, to comment, send an email my way if you want to get in touch with Ellie about any of this kind of stuff. I'm sure she'd be happy to talk about Australian digital PR with you. You can reach Ellie. She's super active on LinkedIn. You can check out all the great work that Ellie and her team are doing at prosperitymedia.com.au as well. Ellie, thanks again. I really appreciate you coming on. And have a great rest of your day. And I'm going to probably go to sleep in a few.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks again. Reminder, like and subscribe. Like I said, leave notes in the comments if you want to get in touch with Ellie or me. I'm sure she'd be happy to answer any questions, and good luck out there.